Hello, and thank you for joining us for this edition of Parent2Parent. Today we have with us Mom Susan, and founder and president of BabyLiving Lab. She is a mentor and advisor for various startups, as well as a fellow of the Stanford's D-Health program that took place in Barcelona. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Susan, for joining us. How are you doing today?
Wonderful, and thank you for inviting me to participate.
For those of you who are not aware of what Parent2Parent is, Parent2Parent allows parents to share their NICU experience and their story so other parents know what the NICU experience is like for different parents. Because every parent is different. We all have different stories, and some of them with great winning victories, and some of them with some losses. And so, Susan, I would like to find out, starting out, how many kids do you have?
I have 2 boys, twins, fraternal twins.
Okay. And which one, or both, were in the NICU?
They were late preterm, so they were born at 35 weeks. They stayed there for almost 3 weeks, about 2.5, 3 weeks in a small NICU.
Okay. How long was, you said 2.5, 3 weeks as far as the NICU stay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why were they in the NICU? Would you care to expound on that?
Well, I think all of us who are kind of, when you have multiple, it's a high-risk pregnancy, so my whole experience with my ob-gyn was high risk. We knew that the babies were going to come early. They run out of space, in your tummy, and obviously, in terms of development, they weren't able to feed on their own. And they dropped in their weight. They needed to put some weight on. They were in the incubators for breathing initially. I had gone into early labor, so of course I had gone into the hospital. I had shots to kind of try and slow it down, which it didn't. And they both came out early, so they just needed that. They just needed that additional care for a few weeks to stay. At the clinic.
Mm-hmm. You are in a different country. Normally, I don't ask people to share where they are, but because you're overseas, would you care to share where you are in location or where you were when your babies were born?
Sure. Well, you can hear I'm from the States. I'm a Brooklyn girl from New York. But I've been living abroad. I'm an expat. We lived a number of years in Portugal, and the babies were born, my sons were born in Barcelona, Spain, and that's where I am right now. So I live in Spain. So I've gone through the healthcare system before children in the U.S., and now the healthcare system, having kids. They were born here. Mm-hmm.
Wow. How do you think that experience was different as far as the NICU is concerned?
In general, having worked in the healthcare area in Europe, I think it gives me a unique perspective because I've seen the healthcare system here, worked with a number of doctors. I've worked a number of years in continuing medical education. I have to say that there's an incredible humanity and a caring and not feeling rushed in the healthcare system. Not as I did. Plus, I benefited from, Spain and Portugal both have free public healthcare systems and accessible private insurance. And in fact, my ob-gyn is an American doctor who's been here a number of years. And she goes back, every year she does her training going back to the States and is very much in contact with her colleagues. And one of the things that she mentioned to me is she's able to give more care here than much of what her colleagues are able to offer due to reimbursement, the very complicated system. So there was never an issue with ultrasound, we'll do another one, scans, things like that. It was just easier in terms of the cost to really be able to afford and to have that kind of standard of prenatal care and then in ICU. Mm-hmm.
With your babies being in the NICU, it was late term. Did you have any worries or fears of any other complications that would have taken place during that time?
I have to say, my knowledge has come later. I was blissfully ignorant of, and it wasn't really, it really things did not show up in terms of developmental issues till a number of years later, and I think that actually happens with a lot of moms and dads of preterm. You know, you don't know until they start, you know, they're in school and you start to see these things. And so in our case, we didn't find out until, you know, a couple of years later. And then, of course, is when I became the advocate, and kind of it was the learning of, oh, there was, you know, these things could happen, or these could be issues. You know, I mean, my sons are 14 years old now, and one example of something, you know, that happened, they were not kept, and I didn't know, and I wish I had known, they weren't kept, you know, in the fetal position as they should have for a long period of time. So I've got one who really walks, you know, with kind of duck feet, and the orthopedic surgeon, you know, I mean, that's just from a bit too much on his back and some other issues that maybe, you know, we could have avoided. But that, you know, it's a minor issue, but it's something now, knowing about fetal positioning and some other things, you know, perhaps could have been avoided.
I'm going to take a dive. I'm going to let the audience know I know more than I should know. Your twins were 14 years ago, and so I'm going to ask this question, and if you cannot respond, we're going to give you grace. Okay. What advice would you have for a parent in the NICU? What resources or tools would you suggest that they use? Or what do you suggest, whether it's pulling on a family member or a tool while they're in the NICU for support?
I mean, I think you have to take, first off, always, I think you have to really take advantage of the amazing nurses who work there. I think they are such a wealth of information, and I might get in trouble for saying this. I mean, great, incredible doctors, but I think the nurses are the front line with they are such a source of information. I'm hesitant. I think you have to find the right resources when you go online. Just like any healthcare or any medical issues, you know, always consider the source if you're going to get information. You know, I've also been, you know, well, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but in terms of doing clinical immersion and seeing and living inside of a hospital to see what they do. I also think other parents are an amazing support. And one of the things that you do have now, which probably I didn't have years ago, there are amazing organizations that have forums, that have a lot of online groups that can help you. So I think the resources that are out there are much more. I mean, I read books, you know. I spoke with my mom. You know, that's what I did. It was different. But I think you have a lot more resources of organizations. I think you've got, you know, hospitals that are a lot more savvy in terms of patient education materials. And there's more dynamic. You know, we have our little, you know, we've got our little libraries. Basically, our libraries that come with us and can inform us, and incredible apps. You know, like yours, other great, you know. So I think there are a lot more resources that people can access that I did not have. Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're going to switch gears. You are the founder and president of BabyLiving Lab. Can you tell the world, what is BabyLiving Lab? I am completely intrigued by it. I love the concept. But share with the viewers and parents what BabyLiving Lab is and what BabyLiving Lab could potentially be meaningful for them.
Okay. Well, probably maybe a step back. How did I get to the point of starting BabyLiving Lab? I was also in transition because I had been leading a nonprofit trade association, and prior to that I had been working in continuing medical education and in healthcare, and I kind of had a moment of a pivot to go back to healthcare. And I came across this program that was inspired and affiliated with the Stanford Biodesign program, and it's called Design Health Barcelona. And I really kind of fell into it, and it was a program where they took this multidisciplinary team. So I was a business person, a product designer, an engineer, and someone with a science background, and just threw us into clinical immersion. And in our case, we went to a NICU. And so and it was a level 4, so it wasn't anything like what I had experienced with my babies, which was a really small hospital, very tiny. This was really with the most difficult cases. And we just had to shadow and live in that space and find unmet needs and try to come up with solutions. That's the program. So I went from, running a non-for-profit, working before that in institutional relations, continuing medical education, to boom, I'm walking around in a hospital and with a notebook trying to figure out, what's something that we might find as an unmet need and then develop a solution for it. And Stanford's program, its methodology is amazing. So long and short, let's speed it up. Went through the program, an amazing experience, learning that was incredible in terms of the process, design thinking, lean business, startup, all of those tools. And our startup did not continue for a number of reasons. And my partner and I, it was sad, after a number of months of really trying, almost a year of trying to make that happen. And so why did BabyLiving Lab? I had all of this knowledge, all of this information, all of this that was just sitting there, and a frustration that, there are more entrepreneurs and people who need to have support in getting these solutions to the premature babies. So this neonatal innovation pipeline, what's stopping it? What's stopping the innovation? And I think, the core of BabyLiving Lab is that what we want to create is a hub, a co-creation space where we bring in the voices of everyone, because that's the only way that we're going to solve and really help to make these solutions reach market. It might be ideas coming from industry, from parents, insights from clinicians, insights from nurses, insights from therapists, insights from people who may not even necessarily be directly involved, but are solvers, are tinkerers, people who just have a good way of looking at a problem and think they can solve it. And so BabyLiving Lab first is starting as a place to inform and say, what is the landscape of innovation? What is going on right now? What are the great products or not so great products that are, hitting the market? Who's getting investment? Why are they getting investment? And so we're at that first phase right now of just saying, can we inform and kind of almost say, what's the playing field right now? What's going on in the neonatal ecosystem? What's going on in terms of innovation? And then the idea that we can, reach out to parents, reach out to all of the different players, which is why it's called a living lab, because a living lab is that. You get the public, the private, the government, everyone, and say, we need to solve this bigger problem. And that's what we're hoping to do. But right now, we're just hoping to inform, to engage, and eventually to hopefully, get insights that can help, push innovation and get, more products, more services, more technology, help those people along. We just want to be like to support that process and just help that innovation reach market.
You actually encompassed my next question, because I really wanted to hit on the neonatal village, and I wanted you to talk about your catchphrase, the neonatal village, but you have already done that. I love, and I'm actually going to pull your catchphrase up right now. I was looking at my notes, and I don't have it written on my notes. So I'm going to pull up would you share with everybody the catchphrase? Because I think that actually encompasses what is needed. Pulling in the technologists, pulling in the educators, pulling in the nonprofits, pulling in parents. BabyLiving Lab.
Do you want to, are you pulling it up on the screen?
I am. I'm not going to, actually, I will have to share it. Give me 1 second, and I will pull it up and share it.
Well, I think everyone's familiar with the phrase, it takes a village.
Yes. There we go. It takes a village to raise and nurture ideas but there was also, when you go to Discover Lab or Discover the Village, uh-oh.
I think it's on the home page there, yeah. It's the World Neonatal. Mm-hmm.
And this is what and you've already discussed it. I am completely enthralled with that, and you've actually covered that. You talked about where you're headed in the first phase. I'm going to skip forward. Where do you see yourself, say, 6 years from now? Everybody says 5 to 10. I think 6 years is a good median. Where do you see yourself 6 years with this? Without disclosing too much of your plan, where do you see BabyLiving Lab as far as it affects parents and the community?
I think it's a great question because, you know, that's an exercise that you also do in design thinking. Can you vision where you see the solution or where you see something going, or looking back on your career and what impact? So on a personal level, I think with BabyLiving Lab, I hope that in 6 years we could actually have a list of products and services that we've helped them reach clinical care and are part of you know, servicing premature babies. So I would hope that we would have a list of wonderful products and services that somehow have been able to benefit from the insights of the community, and really been able to get there. You know, as a business, yeah, we hope it has a, you know, a viable business model and sustainable, and we might move on to some other project. So I'm not sure. In 6 years, it's a bit hard to kind of quantify exactly, but I hope that we have results and things that we can measure and that are tangible and that people can point to and say, yeah, we helped a little bit. You know, we put a few more drops in the bucket towards innovation.
Okay. You're already looking in this retrospect as far as innovative products. Can you name 2 products off the top that you think that parents should be aware of? Actually, I'm going to make it 2-part, and I'm going to ask part of the question now, and then I'm going to come back and ask the second part. Susan is great at knowing what is out there for parents. I'm going to interject real quick. I was able to speak with her not too long ago, and within 20 minutes, she named out 4 products that I had never heard of. And so will you name 2 products that you think that would benefit neonatal parents, maybe one from Europe and one from the United States? Yes, I've thrown you off. That question's not on the list. That question is actually something that I've been thinking of from the other day. I'm like, how she's able to rattle these products off. And this is the company, this is the founder, this is what it's doing. This is the benefit. She is awesome at that.
You got
she's
me
a very
really
good forward thinker. Huh? Say it again?
You got me stuck on trying to figure out what might be. Okay, well, I'm not sure if I can name companies, but I definitely think there are 2 trends that I would definitely like to mention that I think are important and perhaps something that we'd like to push on a little bit in some of our upcoming articles and discussing, and something that's been on my mind. There seems to be mixed reviews about the quantified baby in terms of all of these things that we're seeing in adults, you know, Fitbits and, you know, measure and you know, check the vitals and so many different things, and things that might be, you know, start in the healthcare system or go home with the baby in terms of monitoring. What I'd like to see, and I hope we will get there, is to see an initiative in terms of sharing kind of the digital biomarkers, the data. And I think we're seeing in the adult devices people that are considering what to do with the data. I think it's so much more imperative with newborns and premature babies that we really look at that issue of what's the information coming off that can help push clinical studies that can give more insight. So I would say I'd hope that the digital biomarkers, that someone really picks up on that and really works to really collect that data. I think we're doing a great job in some other areas, but where we definitely need it with this very this smaller, more dispersed population is to really work on the digital biomarkers. So that I've always had an interest in the data and analytics. So I think that's somewhere that there's a huge trend. I think the second area. Again, not necessarily. Well, actually, you probably have a little more familiarity with that. But I think one doctor explained to us when we were in clinical immersion, and the neurologist. And I do think that the last years have been amazing for research below the neck. But the next frontier, and very much so, is the head, and MRI and using that more of a tool and really being concerned about, quality of life and developmental issues and brain development is probably the next frontier, whether it be in drugs as well as what can be used with MRI. I'm not a clinician, but I always found it fascinating, speaking with the doctors about that, where, his little sketch on a piece of paper was, we've done so much from here down, and now, we're really looking, neck up, and what does it mean in terms of quality of life? So those were probably the two areas. Not so much products, but I think there are a lot of products in quantified baby, and I think MRI, they're just starting with the small machines and starting to see where that might go. So my two predictions.
No, that's a great prediction. Actually, you answered the second question. I was going to say, as far as tech people are concerned, entrepreneurs and things of that nature, you answered that question. You had a moment to think of a product? Because I'm thinking of two that you shared with me on a few days ago, like Tucky, the thermometer. Would you care to share about that?
Oh, Tucky, right. That's a startup, I think, out of France. And so they have takes temperature and some other vitals, but it tucks right under your arm, and then goes to an app. And so they're doing some really interesting things. I think it's always wonderful to find out about these initiatives in places that are a bit unexpected. So there are definitely a lot of clinicians who are coming up with ideas. And I think Tucky is a clinician who has that startup out of France. Again, it goes within the kind of quantified baby movement. But yeah, there are a lot of, on our website we talk about, investments, new arrivals where we've put in, where people are getting a bit of money. And so we've seen that there's now, a smart system to track breast milk, inside the NICU. And so I think that's keratin. Which is another exciting, it's always great. I'm always excited when I hear that these groups are getting, a good amount of money, to really start their pilot projects. And I think he's going into 11 hospitals with that. So tracking that liquid gold, from preemie moms is very important.
What I'm doing while Susan is talking is I've pulled up BabyLiving Lab again on the new arrivals page. So if any of you care to see it, so here's Keratin, who she's speaking of, and she has a few others if you care to check them out. Actually, Susan, will you talk a little bit about the NICU to parent communication out of England? And can you give a sum up of how that's going to be beneficial to parents in the UK in maybe like 25 seconds?
So we've been having some discussions. We're going to be having an interview coming up with the Neo-Epoch group that is out of Imperial College in London. And so they have two projects that are going on. And their project is the BUDS project. So they're actually looking at developing a communication tool from the electronic health record direct off the system to provide real-time communication with parents. The UK is fascinating in that, unlike in the US, they've got an electronic health record system that, it's a single vendor for the majority of NICUs across the UK. So right there, they can develop a system that they're going to basically hit about 90% of the babies who go into their system. They have a very, very robust group that's looking at and keeping track of their data from their electronic health records. So there's a really good program of streamlining the information. The second initiative that we're going to be talking about with them, and there'll be more information on BabyLiving Lab, so definitely look for that interview that's coming up. They have the COIN, it's the outcomes, the core outcomes. So for our audience, I'm assuming that most people are familiar with clinical studies, and you've got to figure out what's, no? Okay.
These are usually moms. This particular audience is moms. They've just gone through the NICU experience, and they are trying to relate, find information and relate.
Okay. Well, anytime, if you want to change technology or drugs that they give a particular baby, that doctor is going to rely on the clinical evidence, okay? And the clinical evidence is only when they've done clinical studies. But when they do a clinical study where they'll test, with 10 or 20 babies, and this is the most simplistic explanation of it, they have to decide what are they measuring, what is the outcome that they want to determine. And I would suggest if you go to BabyLiving Lab and you look at the article, there's a link and they have a beautiful video that explains very easily, what are outcomes. But so if we want to see, a particular, drug and its impact in terms of respiratory issues, then that's, one, how does the baby react on that particular medication is one outcome. There might be another outcome, but the problem is you can't compare apples to oranges. So if you've got one study that's looking at one aspect of a problem and they have certain conclusions, and then another study looks at it in a different way, they can't really compare the two studies. And so what's brilliant is that COIN is saying, we want to hear what parents think are the most important outcomes and come up with a core set of outcomes that everyone can agree on, so that when we start to do more and more clinical studies, that we're going to be able to compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges, and say, here's more evidence so that we can get more, technology, more protocols, more particular therapies or treatments, to the babies. But these studies on premature babies are extremely expensive. You very often may not have enough to do a study, so that statistically it's not really, it's too small of a population. That's always, some of the issues. So, if you're going to do them, you want to do it right. And so I think they're doing a great job of putting out this survey and to really ask all of the parents in the UK, what are outcomes that maybe the doctors are thinking about, but maybe are not your top priority of what you'd like to know. What would be important to you as a parent, or a preemie who's an adult. They're surveying everyone to find out what are the most important outcomes when there are clinical studies being done. So you can read more about it on BabyLiving Lab. We have an article, written by the two doctors who are working on both of these projects. So it's very exciting, and it's part of their research work for the next, I think, 2 or 3 years. So how great is that?
That is pretty cool. Yes,
yeah,
very, very
great.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
Any final thoughts or comments for parents? You've spoken while you've been speaking, you've actually been speaking personally to different audiences. So any final thoughts for parents and any final thoughts for anybody who's working in the tech space, whether in innovation, whether they're entrepreneurs, clinicians, and even nonprofits? Any final thoughts?
I would love to have sort of a call to action. I think that the voices of everyone, of parents, nurses, doctors, if you have seen something that you think could be fixed or done better, there are people who want to hear about it. And, we're definitely a place that we want to hear about it. We want to make those connections to the people who are investing and looking, at innovation and different therapies and different technologies and different solutions. So I would say that I think all of us, whether it's parents or grandparents or people who've been, or who've had, a preemie, your voice is now being heard, and it's not being heard to act upon you, but as you as an actor in the, as a solver in the innovation. And so I think there's a huge shift going on right now, that the voices of parents are becoming so important, and probably the only voice that's truly been missing kind of in this innovation pipeline. And so I would just hope that people can, parents and grandparents and other people can kind of reach out and say they can be part of it.
Susan, I'm going to detour. Normally I would wrap it up right then. I want to ask, what are your boys doing now? How are they now? It's 14 years later. You had late preterm babies. They didn't have many issues in the NICU. What's life like for them now?
I think they're my boys, they're great. I mean, no, they're doing really well. I do have, we identified probably my one son with dyslexia and attention deficit. It didn't come up until he was maybe 6 or 7 years old. I think that dealing with a child who has learning challenges is a different path. There's definitely, I've become much more so an advocate here because of that, because of those. So I would say our path may have gone in a different way of having that, but I think all parents have different issues that probably pop up with their kids, but they're doing great, and we're learning, we're working with the school, we're working with the tools and being an advocate. So I guess I've been an advocate in a lot of different ways. But,
I think we're going to have to put that on your label.
Yeah.
Susan, thank you very much for your time today. Parents, I hope that you tune in and feed off of the passion that Susan has for NICU and innovation in the NICU, and to make parents' lives better and to make babies' lives better while they're going through this journey. Thank you for your time. Until next time, this is Parent2Parent.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Did you close it?
I did not. Give me 1 second. My screen just got bigger. I stopped the video, but
I think that went well.
I
hope so.
I think it went very well.
I mean, I felt like I had long answers for You caught me